Oh, I'm sorry. Welcome back to the Combo Couch. I'm Pasta Jardula.
And I'm Fiorella.
And Oz is on the ones and twos. Fam, I apologize. I don't know if you know this, but I'm now a newspaper guy. I get the newspaper delivered early in the mornings. It's the Las Vegas Review, but the main page has all the AP articles so I can get the pulse of what's going on in America right in the morning, fam. So I transitioned. I'm a morning guy and I'm a newspaper guy. How you doing today?
Sam, I think the audience is tired of you telling them that you're now a morning guy because they get it. They see you all the time. And, we're trying to bring younger people in. I don't think the newspaper thing's going to help them. Like, this is the 21st century, maybe get a TikTok. I think you should make a TikTok. I think you'd be successful.
Fam, you can sniff out the BS of what's going on and what the mainstream media is doing. Look, New Zealand to end most COVID mandates. You know what I'm saying? You can get a sniffing of what's going on, of what the mainstream media is saying. It's all AP here. It's all, I don't think the Nevada Review even has one journalist in there that's going to write about foreign policy. They just defer the whole paper to the AP, the Associated Press. And then if you go look at these titles online and you Google them, you can see how everybody is repeating the same narrative. Our democracy is at what stake? Remember the whole thing with you remember the thing with the thing, right, fam? When all the newscasters were saying the same thing?
Oh, yeah.
That's the thing. And that's kind of like what the paper is.
The thing.
The thing.
You sound like Joe Biden, fam. Are you okay?
Fool me once, fam. Shame on you. Fool me twice. You're not going to fool me again. Fam, we got a loaded folder today. We got a loaded show. We have one of our all-time favorite guests on here. I mean, literally, I think we've had people like Reverend Annie Chambers on, Jimmy Dore, Tulsi Gabbard, Dr. Cornel West, Cynthia McKinney, right? All these powerhouse names, we've had them on the show. Max Blumenthal, right? All these great people. We've had Kim Iverson on the show. Everybody else, but one of our favorite interviews, we were like smiling and showing the love through the camera. And the guy who has really changed the definition of the word anarchism for me, Keith McHenry, is going to be here, ladies and gentlemen, from Food, Not Bombs. And that is going to be exciting.
Yeah, he's going to come on and discuss a couple of things. Things that are happening right now, especially with the arms manufacturers making a killing off of this war, fam. So I'm sending him the link right now, and he'll be here at about 1 o'clock. So why don't we get started?
Now we're going to talk about the fleecing of the Treasury. But Oz, why don't you show that thumbnail again 1 second? Put that up there. You did an amazing job. You got MBS up there. You got Uncle Joe, Joey Cockroach, and a nice Yemenis child sitting there, whatnot. I mean, when you do good work, I want to make sure that we elevate your work. Look how beautiful. That's one of my favorite thumbnails that you've ever done. That's beautiful, Oz. Great job. Everybody, Roar Media, go over to the Rockfin, go over to the YouTubes, like it, subscribe. You know the deal. Fam, I pulled this article the other day from Anti-War, and it just drove me crazy because I was on Twitter, and I was looking at this, and I was looking at that Hollywood star and that politician or this person who works in Congress or who's a staffer, and everybody's got their Ukraine flag. Now they're all Ukraine. I stand with Ukraine. But we've been saying this for how long? What about standing with Yemen? What about standing with Syria? What about standing with Libya? But when we talk to Yemen, this is March 21st, right? From antiwar.com. The U.S. sends Patriot missiles to Saudi Arabia. Fam, you know as well as I, and this is the deal. Let's take a look. The Biden administration has sent a significant number of Patriot missile systems to Saudi Arabia in recent weeks to help the kingdom intercept Houthi attacks. Now, I like the way they frame it, and this is the U.S. told the Associated Press. What Houthi attacks are they going to use these missiles on? This is for offense. This is for killing. This is for destroying. And these weapon systems here, these aren't like the Stinger missiles or the small things that were given to Ukraine. These are highly sophisticated missile systems over here. In 2021, the U.S. removed some Patriot and THAAD missile systems from Saudi Arabia as part of its effort to focus military posture on countering Russia and China, of course. Over the past few months, Houthi attacks on Saudi Arabia have increased as the U.S.-backed Saudi-led coalition has escalated its air war in Yemen. That's why I like reading antiwar.com. You see that last sentence, fam? As the U.S.-backed Saudi-led coalition. We're backing, fam. We're paying for it. We're funding it, and it's
So
just disgusting.
is it a coincidence that their title though is in blue and yellow? Or
No, I don't. I don't know. I don't think so. I think because on the regular anti-war on the webpage, it still had that regular anti-war. That was the phone edition, and I think it's always had the blue and yellow there.
oh, okay.
So I
So it
don't think
is
it's
okay.
yeah, yeah. And fam, that's not yellow. That's mustard. It's a completely different color. Maybe get your eyes checked or something. I don't know. That's not Ukraine style. Okay.
Cam, I have seen implicit propaganda on a lot of places for but with the Ukrainian flag color. So
We
I'm just
yeah, and to be fair, we were questioning a anti-war.com article that was kind of, a little bit. It seemed a little bit more friendlier for the Ukrainian situation, but I think that they've called it like it is, whatnot. Uh, Once again, I think we've talked about this on many shows that a lot of people say that we're anti-war across the board, but you can't start the war calendar when it's convenient for you. There were many things for the last 8 years. You can go back for the last 20 some odd years that have led up to Putin going in there. We know this. We understand this. We've been talking about it for quite some time. So I don't think it's fair to say I'm against all war. I'm against what Putin's doing. No, you have to talk about the 8 years. And like I said, you don't have to justify it, but it should be expected when you're doing that hanky panky on the Russian border and then kind of, quoting that you're going to go get nuclear weapons. It's just enough is enough, right? Um,
hanky panky.
Hey, you know what I mean? The craziness on the border with the Donbass region. Slide number 8, Oz. Amid the spike in violence, Saudi Arabia asked the U.S. to provide more Patriot missiles, and the development of U.S. Patriot systems comes as the Biden administration is looking to Riyadh. It's that. Did I say that right? I should know how to say that's capital of Saudi Arabia, to help ease oil prices. So here's what it is, fam. It's the old school Joey B gangster. Hey, let me grease your palm. I'll get you some Patriot missiles. I'll step up your capacity. Hey, you know what? If it kills a little bit more Yemeni people, who cares? You give us a price on the oil. What do you say? A backdoor deal, fam, taking place in real time, right in front of us.
I just don't understand why you have to add the accent like it's not the Sopranos, fam. This is the combo pouch.
Yeah, but this deal is like a Sopranos deal. It's literally he's greasing the wheel and giving them high grade Patriot missiles so they ease the price of oil. You know what I'm saying, fam? So this is mafioso. This is cartel. This is some gangster shit right here. This is really, really bad because the next slide 9, this is what I'm talking about because what do these missile systems do? In Yemen, the number of children killed or injured continues to increase as violence escalates. At least 47 children were reportedly killed or injured in several locations in Yemen in the first 2 months of the year alone, fam. Now we're talking about getting hit with high artillery, getting maimed, getting blown away. We're not even talking about the blockade, which is starving kids out, or the sanctions, which is really fucking them up. We're talking about them getting their heads maimed, you know what I'm saying? And their bodies killed all over the place. That's what these weapons are doing. So when you see all these Hollywood stars with their Ukraine flag in their bio, fam, don't you think they're being a little hypocritical and they're not looking over here because this one's a US-led coalition? No?
It's about money, essentially, because the US stands to make a lot of money off of this sale to Saudi Arabia. They also stand to make a lot of money off of the weapons they're selling to using essentially and to like via Lockheed Martin and via Boeing and Raytheon, but they don't stand to make a lot of money to help Palestinians or Syrians or people in Afghanistan. So they're not going to act. It's always about the money. And at the end of the day, that's really, I mean, these dumbasses that put their Ukrainian flag on their profile pictures or whatever, they completely ignore that whole aspect, and they just want to feel good that they think they're so virtuous that they're on the right side of things, and it just makes them useful idiots. It is all it is. They're just useful idiots, and these actors get paid a lot of money to pretty much be voices. I mean, Ashton Kutcher is like constantly linked to the CIA, and his wife, of course, is Mila Kunis, who is a Ukrainian descent. And she is, of course, also like somebody that was paid, that has this sort of like, she did a whole fundraiser. They raised the money for Ukrainian refugees. It's like, why are you millionaires, multimillionaires raising money? Why aren't you just donating it yourself? Why are you making poor people like be in charge of this? It
Yeah.
just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. Instead of asking and having a fundraiser for other people's money, just donate your own and brag about it. I'd rather
Right.
have that. You know what I'm saying? And it's kind of crazy. And I also want to point out that like all these politicians, squad members, Bernie and stuff like that, just because they say we have to end the famish fam in Yemen, and that's what we're going to do. That is just virtue signaling when you're not going to hold Joe Biden's feet to the fire to end this shit. Okay. And we know he won't do it. Why? Because of the petrodollar, because of our monarchy that we have propped up over here. Saudi Arabia only exists because the United States allows it to exist. And there's some dirty, dark shit going on over there too as well. You know, okay, this is crazy. And it just amazes me that nobody says anything about this stuff and they don't hold Joe Biden's feet to the fire. Remember when he first became president? We're going to end the war in Yemen and stuff. This is just quite the opposite, fam. We're amping it up and we're ramping it up. Number 10, this is by the UNICEF representative to Yemen in Sana'a, the capital of Yemen. Following the intensification of the conflict in 2021, violence has continued to escalate this year. And as always, children are the first and the most to suffer, right? It's all about the children, right? Just over the first 2 months of the year, 47 children were reportedly killed or maimed in several locations across Yemen. Since the conflict escalated in Yemen nearly 7 years ago, the UN verified that more than, ready for this, fam, 10,200 children have been killed or injured. The actual number is likely much higher. Fam, if it's all about the children, why aren't we stopping this? 11, UNICEF calls on all the party to the conflict in Yemen and those with influence over them to protect the civilians wherever they are. Children's safety, their well-being, and protection must be safeguarded at all times. Violence, misery, and grief have been a commonplace in Yemen, with severe consequences on millions of children and families. It is high time that a sustainable political solution is reached for people and their children to finally live in peace they so well deserve, fam. And just to let you know, fam, we don't give a damn about these people over here. This is ridiculous right here. And it just disgusts me the way the Congress, the way the mainstream media, the way the White House, they're all getting on this anti-Putin bandwagon, this Russophobia of sorts and stuff like that. And people are playing into it when we literally have right now, today, we have a mechanism in which we can go and stop right now that would literally save thousands and thousands of children's of lives, fam. Do you have anything to say? Because I want to show you the other area in which Joey B, the gangster, has also hurt children.
No, yeah, let's talk about Afghanistan. Let's talk about this area that also nobody's talking about. Exactly,
right? And we said this before, fam. The actual sanctions being an act of war, just repeating what Mike Gravel taught us, kills. It's an act of war. It kills more children than sometimes the bombs. This is from Counterpunch, slide number 12. Starving people committing a genocide, Biden sanction on Afghanistan. And you can see the child right there. When the United States stole $7 billion from Afghanistan on February 11th, funny because we're trying to steal Russian gold right now. That's why I'm saying, Finn, that's why I did the Italian voice, the gangsters. That was no mere crime of robbery. It was a war crime and a crime against humanity that condemns possibly millions of Afghans to starvation. In short, prelude to genocide. Biden prevaricates about, did I say it right? Prevaricates about his excuse for this outright theft on Afghan funds, namely compensating the 9/11 victims. Wow. Wow. Starving kids. And we don't have enough money ourselves. How about you take the money, instead of giving the Patriot missiles that you spend all the money on to the Saudis, you take that money, okay? Because it was the Saudis, mostly Saudis, who flew that building through that plane through the building, and take the money out of that and give it to those survivors. It's all twisted. The Afghan government didn't kill their loved ones. Indeed, back in 2001, the Taliban offered to turn the al-Qaeda culprits over to Washington. The U.S. refused the offer and invaded instead, fam. So anything about Afghanistan, and please tell me that doesn't blow your mind that Joey B and his administration's their excuse for taking gold away from from the Afghan government because of the Taliban that eventually affects kids and kids starve and die is because they want to give it to 9/11 victims. Meanwhile, they're arming the Saudis to the T. Your thoughts?
It's bullshit. They're not even, it's not about the 9/11 victims. It's about maintaining this population down because they don't want a resurgence of an anti-Western coalition. And what inadvertently ends up happening is it festers anyway. You know, a lot of these countries like Iran, Syria, and and Afghanistan will follow, have become extremely anti-Western and have kind of developed their own culture, rescued their own culture away from the Westernization, whether the U.S. likes it or not, whether the U.S. calls them radicals and assumes that women wearing hijabs are all like torture. That's that's the U.S. ways, assuming that people of this culture are all burdened, and that they need to be more Westernized in order to be free. And it's bullshit. And it's not even about that. It's about control. It's about exerting dominance over the world, and it's global dominance. And what we're seeing is pushback against that now, especially with the relation shifting a little bit. And I think what's happening in Afghanistan, I think people are going to see years later as a U.S.-led genocide. The U.S. likes to call everybody a dictator, and a genocidal maniac like Bashar al-Assad, but really, who's killing thousands of people? Who's already been responsible for thousands of dead Iraqis, for thousands of dead now Afghanis, and people in Yemen? So it's the same thing. I think this is going to catch up to the United States, and there are people that need to be tried for crimes against humanity.
Yeah. Wishful thinking there, right? I mean, man, they're just walking around. George Bush gets to sell his paintings. Have you seen his paintings? They're pretty foul. It looks like a sixth grader did them. You know what I'm saying? But you're absolutely right, and that's the sick thing. Like people like Julian Assange, who's exposed these war crimes and sitting in jail, and the warmongers, the ones who push this type of these arms sales and whatnot. It's all about the finances. They're the ones who really, they should be tried for war crimes. It's a shame that they're not, fam. But I just wanted to point that stuff out there as I saw wild stuff going on in Ukraine and Russia. We're the way we're trying to rectify the situation is go to Saudi Arabia, arm them even more, give them more weapons they have, so we can get cheaper oil prices. And that's the thing, with that when you true or false, fam. A lot of people in the United States will be okay with that. Yes, true or false?
Oh yeah, especially people on the more conservative, side that think America first means you have to put other people down, and that's unfortunate because the reason you have a lot of immigration issues is because of that foreign policy, and it's not American first at all. American people are still going to be paying higher prices than average on gas, and that it was totally avoidable, and they're blaming Russia for it when it's not. Yeah. And a lot of Americans are going to suffer food shortages because it's what I'm going to be talking about next, because of this whole conflict. And as long as they're okay, then everybody else can go to hell. But that world order is shifting.
Yeah, I just want to say that it really drives me crazy. This is the reason why I didn't like Donald Trump when he used to say, we went in there. Why didn't we take the oil? You take the oil. Like, wait a second. Why should we take the oil? And then he did it in Syria. Because we sacrificed lives and stuff in there. So they have to pay us back by taking the oil. We shouldn't even be there to begin with. You know what I'm saying? And I think a lot of Americans were okay with that. It's like, well, we're there. We did all this stuff. Let's take the oil. It's cheaper oil for us. It helps us out. Like you said, it's American first. But it really is not. And that's something which really why we are anti-imperialist, why we are the way we are. It's these reasons right here. So I know that when people are hearing the fact that, Joe Biden got a better oil deal from the Saudis because he provided them weapons, they'll be okay with it. They'll be okay with it, and you shouldn't be okay with it because this leads to all the problems we have right here. That's what it is. Trey Wright. Thank you so much, Trey Wright. Albright is dead. Happy Wednesday, you beautiful, sexy, handsome mother. Um, is Madeline Albright dead? That must be breaking news. That's awesome. And no, I don't want to celebrate anybody's death, but I just said it's awesome that somebody's died. I don't want to say that. But I mean, fam, the woman wasn't the nicest woman in the world.
I mean, I have no idea what he means by that. So it could be Twitter, or it could be something else. So I'm not going to comment on it because I don't know what he means by that. So I don't know.
I'm looking it up right now. She died.
She died. Okay.
Well. Yes. At 84. I mean, this woman said it was worth it, right? To kill 1 million Iraqi children with the sanctions and whatnot.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I don't know. You don't want to celebrate anybody's death, fam, but you really can't cheer and root on a person who says it's okay that 1 million children, 1 million souls died.
No, she's one of the worst. Yeah. She's definitely one of the worst people on Twitter too.
I thought that Anna gave her a second interview and she passed away on site or something.
Yeah. Are you talking about Sally Albright or Madeline Albright?
Madeline.
Okay, Madeline.
Madeline's gone at 84.
Madeline Albright. Yeah.
Yep. You ready to get into the next section? There's no more super rays right there. We got 104 people watching.
Crazy warmonger. I think warmongers people should be allowed to dance on their graves, but that's just me.
Especially when somebody says there's 1 million souls dying is okay.
Yeah.
So
okay. So we have this section. I'm going to go ahead and do it. Although our guest should be here any minute.
Should we just go to the key section?
It
is 12:57.
Yeah, let's just go to that section and we'll go back to this one. Slide number 2033. So the US manufacturers have made a killing. They hit the jackpot with Russia, Ukraine, right? And we're going to be discussing some of this with Keith McHenry and some of the media manipulation and the lies of what's been happening. And I'm going to ask Keith about the state of America. As you guys know, he is from Food Not Bombs. He wrote the Anarchist Cookbook.
Yes.
And he is extremely anti-war and does a lot of work for the unhoused in California, right? Providing food, which has caused him some trouble for doing that. Just feeding people is apparently not okay by the system. So I wanted to bring him on to discuss this because I'm going to start talking about it. This is the Hill, the Ukrainian conflict, a boon for defense industry. This was from a few weeks ago. And they talk about how much money is at stake. So the Hill wrote, there's a lot of possibilities for ways that the contractors will benefit. And in the short term, we could be talking about tens of billions of dollars, which is no small thing, even for these big companies. William Hartung, the senior research fellow at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, told the Hill, President Biden, remember, signed a $1.5 trillion government funding bill with $782 billion towards defense. And it was $30 billion more than the initial request and 6% larger than last year's package. So when you're talking about all these dead Yemeni children and all these Afghan people, this is all part of it. The bill is also providing $6.5 billion military support for Eastern European countries, of course, including $3.5 billion for Ukraine, and weapons to Ukraine, which end up in the hands of neo-Nazis. And of course, this is $1 billion that the U.S. already, in addition to $1 billion that the U.S. already gave in for weapons, including Javelin anti-tank missiles manufactured by Lockheed Martin and Raytheon Technologies, and Raytheon's anti-aircraft Stinger missiles that we've all seen at play. There's an old saying, a high tide raises all ships. So I think that when you start putting that kind of money into the pipeline, certainly we want our companies to compete for that, said Arnold Pinero, a retired 3-star general and former staff director at the Senate Armed Services Committee, who now works as a defense industry consultant. One defense lobbyist told The Hill that the near-term implications of quick sending more equipment and defense and systems to the Ukrainians means we're going to have to backfill some of that ourselves. So we have the forces, so that will force the Pentagon to buy more from some of the defense companies. And since the start of the new year, Lockheed Martin's stock has soared by 25%, while Raytheon, General Dynamics, and Northrop Grumman so each saw their stock price raise by around 12%. And in January, Lockheed Martin CEO James Towsett said that the renewed great power competition would lead to inflated defense budgets and additional sales. On the same day, Raytheon Technology CEO Greg Hayes told investors that the company expected to see opportunities for international sales amid the Russian threat. The tensions in Eastern Europe, the tensions in the South China Sea, all those things are putting pressure on some of the defense spending over there. So I fully expect we're going to see some benefit from it. So when it comes to war, it doesn't matter, as you said, Pasta, many times, to them if they win or lose. What matters is that they get to have all this profit from all these weapons manufacturers, and that's what we're seeing as a result of this conflict. And we're going to see this conflict hit American people in their pockets, hit people in Europe in their pockets. And with that, I want to go ahead and welcome our guest, Keith McHenry, to the show. Keith, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is really outrageous that we're spending more and more money on war while the number of people becoming homeless and going hungry around the world, but in the U.S., it's just expanding. It's criminal. Absolutely.
Keith,
go ahead, fam.
Real quick, before you jump in, I just want to ask you right away, what have you seen happen in the U.S., in California, where you're at, in terms of the economics of the country post this quote unquote pandemic and now into this conflict with a proxy war with Russia via Ukraine? In terms of the on the ground crisis in housing and poverty, what has been your experience in the last year or so?
Well, no, we've been outside. I've been outside almost every day now, feeding people for the last 730 days, 700, maybe now about 740 days. And it's really incredible, particularly at the beginning of the month. You will get 2 or 3 or 4 people approaching who are in a state of shock to our meal in Santa Cruz, who just lost their house. They come to us looking for a shelter. It's often older women and single women in their 60s, 70s. And most commonly what has happened is their car has just been towed by the city, so they were living in their car. And they think that there's going to be a shelter. And so they come to us asking for where the shelter is. And so we will call all the shelters. There's never room in the shelters. There hasn't been room in the shelters even for the 10 years before the pandemic. So there's clearly no possible place for people to be. And so then what we've been doing is buying pup tents and putting in and giving the people pup tents and then helping them erect them along the levee, although now the police sweeps have stepped up, even though the CDC, so the CDC rules are like, like I was at the very beginning of the pandemic, when it first started, we learned that all the other food programs in Santa Cruz are going to be shut down because they were indoors. So we became the only food for people for definitely the first 100 days, but probably even longer. And then there was also no water because the people that lived outside were getting water at the 2 public restrooms. They were locked down. And of course, you couldn't go into a bathroom anywhere in the city, so you couldn't get water there. So we became the water. We are also the only reliable hand washing station. And and now we're just seeing the poverty. We see more and more people every day. So the other gauge that we have for measuring is that we order so many paper products from this World Centric, who donates compostable paper products to our chapter and many others. And we have to reorder faster and faster every month because we run out faster. We had to double the amount of times our dumpster was picked up because we were running out of space there. We were doing something like 5-gallon hotel trays of food per day and 2 5-gallon buckets of fruit salad and tossed salad. That had to expand. So every single thing has expanded. And then with the increased gas prices in the last couple of months, the people that were living in their vehicles have become more and more desperate because they can't move their vehicles to stay out of the path of the tow trucks. So we've seen that. There was a brief moment when the stimulus checks came out, that first one, where a lot of people living on the streets bought old used vans. And I guess, and people that are trying to buy used vehicles could see that the prices went up dramatically in that. But that became housing for a lot of people. But then, of course, in the subsequent year after that, people started losing that housing to the police because in our city, as I'm sure is the case in many cities, there's this dramatic attempt to drive the homeless out of sight and out of town. And then in our particular chapter, we share every day from noon to 4. We've had to scramble because the city has kicked us out of one place or another, or we've been kicked out of 2 locations by hedge funds who happen to decide that, they'd gotten to the point in their luxury condominium development that it was time to bulldoze things. And so we would have to move because of that. And that's not been easy because we are also kept raising money and buying shipping containers. So we currently have 3 20-foot shipping containers, one that is refrigerated to just handle the amount of food, because we're very concerned that, and there's been, bumps in getting access to food, even though we're in the, the salad basket of the world. We get food from Second Harvest and donations from, different grocery stores and bakeries. And that, some of our grocery store donations have plummeted because of, I guess what they're saying is supply chain problems, but also just access, you order things and it does not arrive. Second Harvest, which we've been getting donations from, we went from like 1 pallet a week to, at the very beginning of the pandemic, we got something like 50 pallets of food within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and we stockpiled them in that first shipping container. And then we also started feeding live oak. So because you weren't going to school anymore in public schools, we were starting to feed the children in public school system. So that has happened. Then we had fires. That was dramatic. So we also have a free clothing distribution every day, a really, really free market at our meal. And after when the fire happened, we had so many people come looking for clothing because all their clothing was destroyed. And so it's been, the 2 years of the pandemic have been completely psycho as far as handling things. And then I think the other really dramatic thing was in the first month or so, the people that had severe mental health issues had those mental health issues get much more severe, because the people that allegedly had no mental health issues were having mental health issues because of what was going on, not knowing what was happening, were being traumatized and so on. So all of those things have, have conspired to make this, in one hand, a very difficult and ever-increasing crisis for people, poor, people clinging on to their housing. In our community, the rents in the last 12 months went up over 30%. So that's forced another bunch of people into the streets. And then the other thing is hedge funds are buying rental property like crazy around here. So that a lot of people are just being evicted because of hedge funds needing to, upgrade the housing that they've acquired for, investment purposes. So the whole thing is it's a complete crisis, and it's growing. And now with the housing moratorium, the eviction moratorium ending on the 1st, we're anticipating huge number of people entering the streets. And the eviction moratorium hardly worked anyway. It was very difficult to navigate. In our county, your landlord got 2 months rent from the from the money that was provided. There's $47 billion that was supposed to be rent subsidies, of which 40 billion are still not been distributed. And so and meanwhile, we send billions off to fight, to send weapons to Nazis in Ukraine. I mean, crazy.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you 3 quick questions while we're still on the Food Not Bombs part of the whole show. How many meals does Food Not Bombs Santa Cruz make every day?
So we feed, at this point, we're feeding 200 or more per day as hot meals.
How many meals? Like breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
Excuse me?
Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or just like 2 meals?
Well, we just it's just it's from noon until 4. So whatever you want to call that meal, it could be. Some people actually come for the beginning and come back at the end. Then we also have this commodities distribution that we've organized for. So early on, we sued the city, us and the Santa Cruz Homeless Union, to defend a group of about 300 unhoused people from being evicted into doorways and into the forest. And we succeeded largely in that lawsuit, though we had to compromise and people moved to this swampy area below where they had been living. And that group of people has grown to maybe 400 or 500 people. And we provide now 2 pallets of food a week to the kitchens, the kind of ad hoc kitchens down in this, what we call the benchlands. And that's where most people are shoved to when their cars were towed or they find themselves without any possible way to
it's like our Skid Row.
It's our Skid Row, yeah. And it's and we've had Caltrans clear huge areas of camps. We just had a huge camp cleared yesterday. And it's a lot of people call it whack-a-mole. It's just like what happens to Food Not Bombs. We've had 8 evictions just from the city or the county, and 2 from large hedge funds so far in the 2 years we've been doing the pandemic. And there, like I say, there's virtually no support by the city. Millions of dollars. I called what they're doing rule by headline, because you get Gavin Newsom will say there's like a $1 billion to help the homeless or whatever. At one point he had announced $500 million for Operation Room Key, and we got millions of dollars here. In fact, we've spent over $100 million every year through the pandemic on homelessness. But I think even the group that claims to be trying to help homeless people get housing says they got 500 of the thousands of people into housing, although there's not much, I doubt that. I think that's really optimistic and probably not really the case.
Well, let me just a quick follow-up question, and then I'll hand it over to Fam to get started with Ukraine and Russia, because I'd love to pick your brain on that and see where you stand. You said you feed about 400 people a day now, right?
We serve 200 meals a day plus another 400 people groceries.
Okay.
And that's of the unhoused. Then we have another 500 people that are undocumented that we also provide food to.
Wow.
And we were doing a Live Oak School District, but we then passed that on. They were able to get their own connection.
Funding and you're making sure everybody gets fed. It's a beautiful story. That's why we were saying today on the morning show with Steve how you've been one of our favorite guests to come on. It was like a magical show because what you do, I think, is amazing. My question is, and this is a quick one, you feed about 1,000 people a day. When the eviction moratorium ends, you had some data about how many people might have been homeless last time out. How many people do you expect to have to feed once the eviction moratorium ends? And how are you going to get the money to kind of compensate for the extra mouths that you'll need to feed?
Well, okay, so most of our money is actually tied up in things like gas to keep all of our drivers circulating. The food is fortunately largely free. The food that we do buy, which that's been expanding dramatically, is the coffee and creamer and sugar for that. And then the other thing that we spend $2,000 a month on right now is on pup tents for unhoused people. And that is like oh God, it's the most touching thing. When you hand a $35 pup tent to an unhoused person, they cry. It's outrageous. We live in
We know that.
this amazingly wealthy country. I mean, Google is buying huge amounts of our community. That's one of the largest military contractors in the world. And so we have a direct conflict. Food, not bombs, is like a direct thing here. And just to think that you have affordable housing means you need to make about 150,000 a year to get into it. No, that at least that. That's what the requirements are, not under that. And those are for entry-level Google engineers getting studio apartments. So we're handing out pup tents while Google employees are getting luxury condos. So it's a nightmare. And my estimation is it's going to double. So what we just moved to a much larger kitchen, one, because we got evicted from the kitchen we were in, and it could double, triple. We've been stockpiling back food, supplies. We have water filtration systems because we're very concerned that that's going to go down. We are just any money that we get, we buy stuff that we absolutely need and stockpile it because we're fearful that we might not be able to get stuff again.
Yeah.
Pots and pans and massive amounts of rice and beans, and that's why we bought 3 shipping containers, because we're preparing for what will be something probably much worse than the Great Depression. And the other thing you see in our town is you see all these trucks and vans and cars with piles of stuff tied to the roof. And if you look at the photos of the Okies in the Great Depression, it's like that, like already. It's insane. So I mean, it's heartbreaking I think right now, with the advent of potential nuclear war, definitely a global war essentially happening already, and the possibility of it getting even worse. The increased amount of food shortages that are being claimed because of the wheat harvest and so on in Ukraine going down, or the embargoes against the actual wheat that you could potentially buy from Russia, is going to be even more and more hunger. And so, I mean, here we're like at $6 a gallon for gas in many places. And that's a tax on the poor that is enough to eliminate their housing, because they're going to have to make a choice of rent and going to work, or just going to work and getting what money they can. And so and the food price is the same way. I mean, so our grocery distribution alone to people that still can hang on to their housing is getting monumental at this point.
It's going to get worse. You're absolutely right. I don't think Americans realize how bad it's going to get. And I think I'm going to go deep into that in the next section, but I did want to show you guys this video. Now, this video is by RT. So, oh my gosh. So they were banned from YouTube, from pretty much every platform beside Odyssey. And I think, I think that's it. So let's just look at how much money, though, these people are making off of war. And it's about 4 minutes long, but I'm hoping you can hear it, so we can talk about it, and then talk about what you think about this whole situation in Ukraine, Keith. All right, Alex, let's go ahead and play it.
In war, almost everyone loses. But for military contracted corporations, a major conflagration can be hitting the jackpot. A month before things heated up in Ukraine, the CEO of Raytheon, a major Pentagon-contracted corporation, boasted that he saw opportunity.
We are seeing, I would say, opportunities for international sales. Of course, the tensions in Eastern Europe, the tensions in the South China Sea, all of those things are putting pressure on some of the defense spending over there. So I fully expect we're going to see some benefit from it.
He wasn't wrong. Since February 24th, when Russia moved in to protect Donbass, military contracted companies like Raytheon, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and others have seen their stocks soar. Joe Biden sent $1 billion worth of weapons to Kiev in just 1 week, and he had to buy them from somebody. Plus, this war has got U.S. military corporations some new long-term contracts. Germany is spending over 1 billion euros to boost its military. It's committed to spend at least 2% of their GDP on the military each year by 2024.
Russian President Vladimir Putin created a new reality with his invasion of Ukraine. It's clear we need to invest significantly more in the security of our country in order to thereby protect our freedom and our democracy.
New commitments to buy weapons are coming in from Romania, Denmark, France, Poland, the Netherlands, and Italy. The NATO countries are planning to build their own mini army for Western Europe.
We have to be able to react, and one of the ways to react rapidly is the EU rapid deployment capacity that has been agreed. We cannot act alone. We want to act in a more coordinated way among us, and we want to act in a more integrated way with our partners. Acting in complementarity with NATO, which remains certainly the cornerstone of the territorial defense of Europe.
But some in America can smell some foul play.
The war drums are beating very heavily because, look, it's a great distraction from the political crisis. It rallies everybody around the military-industrial complex and the media complex as well.
What we have is, unfortunately, Democrats, Republicans, the mainstream media, the Washington elite, essentially in the pocket of the military-industrial complex.
With every war and every conflict, Raytheon's profits multiply. Raytheon profits multiply as bombs fall on schools, wedding tents, hospitals, homes, and communities. Living, breathing, human beings are being killed. Lives are being destroyed, all for profit.
Wars are government-run money laundering operations from taxpayers. The job of the media is to make the taxpayer agree to war through aggressive, emotional propaganda. People like me, Russell Brand, and Tucker Carlson are enemies of the military-industrial complex.
Sure, there's some pushback, but the military corporations have a way of wielding their influence. Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, and General Dynamics fund something called the Center for Strategic International Studies, paying academics big money to plan out foreign policy and advise politicians. The top 5 military corporations spent roughly $60 million to lobby Congress and politicians back in 2020. Now, that's a lot of money, but it's a drop in the bucket compared to the billions they make from war.
Everyone in D.C. knows that weapons manufacturers are helping skew U.S. policy towards militarism, but they usually try to be less obvious. They are cashing in on tensions over Ukraine as the U.S. pours weapons into the region.
18 members of the U.S. Congress actually have personal stock ownership in military manufacturing corporations. Ever notice how hard some on Capitol Hill will fight against government funding for health care, for food stamps, other programs? We've got to stop this spending, they say, but not when it comes to tanks and drones and tools of death. Years ago, U.S. Marine Corps General Smedley Butler wrote, "War is a racket," describing how big corporations make loads of money from war. What goes on today is far beyond what even he could imagine. Caleb Maupin, RT, New York.
Smedley
Okay.
Butler.
So, yeah. What is your take on all that? I mean, I thought that was a very succinct explanation, and this is why RT is banned, because they don't want people to see, some of the good reporting. But what is your take on all this money being spent, and also simultaneously the way the media is manipulating this conflict to sort of foment, of course, once again, manufacturer consent, and we can really hear the words of Smedley Butler, I think, during this time.
Yeah, well, right off, the first thing that's outrageous is that the Housing and Urban Development federal agency said they could end homelessness in the United States for $40 billion. So, that could have been a priority, but that has never been a priority. So when 9/11 happened, I was a graphic designer for United Way of Tucson in Southern Arizona. And I was fired immediately after 9/11 because Raytheon Missile Systems, which makes the cruise missiles in Tucson and which was the largest contributor to United Way, demanded that I be fired. And then I was subsequently fired from 2 more jobs in Tucson. And in fact, that was the end of my ability to be employed because I was placed on a blacklist for being a co-founder of Food Not Bombs, so I've never been allowed to work in the United States since. So the, you know, it just, and I say the United Way part of it because also when that happened, the vice president of United Way, who had a cubicle near me, was put in charge of calling all of the nonprofits that received funding. And they were told that if any of their employees were caught signing a petition against the war, participating in anti-war protests, or in any way became known as a person that was opposed to the invasion of Afghanistan or Iraq, and that was already starting to you know, be talked about, that they would be cut off, that foundation would lose all of their money. So that was and I'm certain that happened in many parts of the United States where nonprofit groups their employees had to remain silent if they expected to receive funding from United Way. So it goes beyond, and I said that's probably happening right now. Probably anybody that's speaking has been told that you're not allowed to speak out about the, you know, war, and you have to be pro-war in Ukraine, and you have to support the leadership of Ukraine, and you have to support the soldiers in Ukraine, or your nonprofit group will lose all of its funding, and what happens in the nonprofit world, of course, is you're like trying to help you know, disabled people or seniors or some people that you feel compassionate for, and you make that decision. Okay, I'd rather help these people than express my opinion. So that is another whole area of social control, and I'm sure that's true in corporate offices as well. So there's 100% censorship about these issues, and that as far as publicly speaking. Then you know, the other thing that's tragic is that we just, you know what, they're proposing another $780 billion for another year of military spending. And that's on top of just Biden just signing in another $770 billion you know, bucket of money to fund these organizations, you know, basically to give to Raytheon. And I forget the amount, you know, so soldiers themselves that are risking their lives are like practically working at minimum wage, while, you know, Lloyd Austin, who was on the board of Raytheon Missile Systems,
Yeah.
You know, got to have a waiver.
I was going to say he got a waiver. They got a waiver for. Yeah.
And he's still getting like all this money. Plus, he was, as we know, he was also connected in the pandemic health scam that went on, where he reaped huge amounts of money from his private hospital corporations that he had investments in control of. So you know, it's a full court press. I think this is definitely, you know, I got under my desk and giggled with the little girl next to me in elementary school when we had to duck and cover, and we thought adults were really psychotic if they thought this little desk was going to protect us from a nuclear war. At that time, I was living in Bethesda, Maryland during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it's clear that this is far more complicated, worse. You know, for whatever you think of John F. Kennedy, to imagine like negotiating a Cuban Missile Crisis with Joe Biden, that's psychotic. So people should be scared out of their wits, both at the economic collapse, because also at that time in the Cuban Missile Crisis, I think my parents bought their house in Bethesda for $7,000. You know, so you know, this, you know, we're being squeezed as the American public in every possible direction and basically terrorized. So we went through 2 years of total censorship and terror and everything around the pandemic. Now we're into an even worse level of censorship and terror around this war. Then, wow, you know, let's, you know, they're just like, and all of a sudden, like a switch of a switch, it went from that there was inflation to, no, it's Russia, you know? And so it's incredible that people are buying this, but they're buying it hook, line, and sinker, unfortunately, in such a hysteria. So I think back to Katie Kollwitz, who's I was an art student at Boston University, and when I started Food Not Bombs in 1980, and I was very interested in her artwork because that's kind of the type of sculpture that gravitated toward and the type of drawings. And she was an artist who was fired in Germany because she wouldn't support National Socialism and Adolf Hitler's program there. And she wrote about how terrifying it was to be in a world where all the other academics that she was with thought that what Hitler was doing was fantastic, you know, and not to compare Biden to Hitler or Putin to Hitler or you know, anybody. Hitler's Hitler, you know. There's like might be Pol Pot. That might be a good comparison, something like that. But you know, so to me, this is like it's very hard to mobilize against this military hysteria and to try to get any money directed toward, you know, the other thing that's really sad, you know, we just got another like $14 million to help the homeless. Well, at 100% of it went to the salaries of already extremely wealthy people running homeless programs. And it's devastating to the homeless. They'll read like a newspaper article, oh wow, 14 million to help us. And then, you know, the people that are new to the streets think that might help them. And of course it never does. The people who've been on the streets for a while realize they're never going to see a penny of it. Nothing's going to happen for them. And so even if we redirected the $40 billion from housing and, you know, from military to housing people, the sad thing is it would never ultimately result in housing people. It would just go to the corrupt system that we live in, and a bunch of poverty pimps in the homeless industrial complex getting, you know, richer and fatter while people are going hungry on the streets. And I've been very interested in the Ukrainian crisis for a long time because Food Not Bombs set up a kitchen in Kiev during the Orange Revolution. And when those volunteers discovered that they essentially were dupes of the US State Department, they became kind of hostile to that whole ideology. So now we do have, I think, 7, 8 groups in Ukraine. We have a ton in Poland, and they're trying to feed the people rushing into Poland. And we have groups all over Russia and as well. And you know, we've had, you know, and then some people go, oh, well, there are no Nazis in Russia. Well, we did have like a few people killed in Food Not Bombs by neo-Nazi groups in Russia. So it's an equal opportunity murder spree. Although those Nazis in Russia were not being funded by a huge US military funding operation, and they were using knives to kill our people. You know, that's a much different thing than giving javelins and Signwinders and tanks. And so I just happened to be watching the attack by football hooligans and people of the Odessa trade union hall. And I saw the red and black flag, and I was like, oh, wow, what in the heck is going on with anarchists burning down a trade union hall? Made no sense. So I wrote my friends in Ukraine to find out what's going on there. And they were like, those are not anarchists. Those are Nazis. And they're not neo-Nazis. These are not neo-Nazis like what we got in the United States. These are Nazis. And so in my correspondence through from the coup, in 2014, up till we lost radio contact with people in Ukraine, it's been clear that they've been terrorized by those same Nazis. So you see the violent attacks by police in the United States on homeless camps here in the United States. Well, right after the coup, I think it's C-14 got the contract to police Kiev. And what did they do? They went out and they destroyed homeless camps and Roma camps. And in the video of them destroying Roma camps in Kiev is shockingly similar to the police destroying camps here particularly the vigilante groups in our country. Like in our case, we have Take Back Santa Cruz, which goes out and attacks and beats homeless people in their camps. So it's you know, you know, and then I don't know if you've talked about this thing that's just horrific, where they duct tape or they surround.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we talked about it. Stuff. They pulled down his Twitter.
It's frightening. And so that's the kind of thing that was already happening before the war. Not the duct taping of people to polls, but you know, there's you know, any kind of gay, lesbian pride march would be attacked by these guys. Let alone the constant shelling, you know, of the Donbass by them for 8 years, and it's and the fact that this, that's where I get my community strike on Facebook, is by posting information that I personally directly know of from actual real people that I really speak to in that region, and that's not allowed. So if you can't even post that on the Facebook page, and not that my Facebook page has any influence on hardly anybody, is really outrageous, So I am fearful that once this becomes an official so-called world war, that the clampdown will be terrible. And then I worked on a peace rally, and I'm almost intimidated now to organize another peace rally, because the one that we did here in Santa Cruz, probably half the people came out with signs or banners or slogans to close the skies. So it's the first peace rally, pro-war peace rally I'd ever organized and attended. And the one guy showed me his, well, first he said he was going to turn me in. And then for some weird reason, he showed me his Facebook page on his cell phone. And sure enough, he had the red and black flag, but he called it the battle flag, and logos from Nazi groups on his Facebook page. And he was saying, well, I'm Jewish, I can't be a Nazi. Then why are you showing me this stuff on your Facebook page if you can't be a Nazi? You think I'm like completely ignorant of the reality of what's going on, like almost everybody else in our community. So it's really frightening. And of course, here, the only media we've had in Santa Cruz about opposition to the war have been the close the skies over Ukraine people. You can't possibly get a no NATO. I brought signs that said end NATO, end war, and things like that. None of that makes the local media, but local media has repeatedly showed the 20 people that that are supporting a wider global war in the local media here, but there's no possible way you could have our opinions. And then I was just thinking back at all the my first anti-NATO protests were back in '92. I attended one, and I attended them in Chicago. I attended them in Istanbul. I've been going to no NATO protests forever. And then the other thing is the like with the pandemic, all the anti-globalization and people that were joining us at the WTO in Seattle and so on, suddenly they become all pro-global corporate power, in March of 2020. And that's pretty shocking, not seeing that there's a continuity between from the Bretton Woods convention all the way through to now digital, universal digital currency and whatever we're facing. So, they've done a really great job of propagandizing, splitting even the left. And I have to say, I want to mention that your program, I felt like alone with my girlfriend and my friend Dr. Shannon Murray, who worked on the Moderna vaccine, who's a lifelong left activist, and my friend Sam Husseini. They were the only people I knew that thought that what was going on with the COVID thing was like that were left wingers, that were and all you'd see is neo-Nazis like at rallies against the lockdown, and it's just kind of horrifying. And it wasn't until you guys spoke back years ago in the pandemic, a couple of years ago maybe now, I go, wow, there are some other left activists that see through this entire trauma that's being forced on the public. And I've been out, like I say, been outside 730 days. The people I saw die on the streets died of fentanyl overdoses. That's who died dies at our meal. Only two of my many, I know several hundred unhoused people in this community, and I only met two people that got COVID that were unhoused. And I thought that might be a disaster for people living outside the first week or two when it first happened. And it turned out that was the safest thing to be, was unhoused under these conditions, because the only two people that were unhoused that did get it, that I met, were living in shelters. And otherwise, the rest of the community was fine. So everything's just been turned upside down. And I think it is it's got to be one of the most frightening periods of world history right now. And it's just incredible to see all this, everybody with the little red the yellow and blue flags on their Twitter accounts and everything like that. And it's incredible. But there are a bunch of us trying to get the word out that essentially a fascist country is who we're supporting, and so hopefully that will break through all the censorship.
All we can do is continue to talk out there, whatnot. And I just want to digress to the beginning of your statement that I don't think you should give Duck and Cover such a hard time when you were laughing under their table. They did make a cool cartoon, Mr. McHenry. You know what I'm saying? And just because also Lloyd Austin worked for Raytheon, I mean, come on, he was the first man of color to hold that position, so we should give some allowances here. But
well, the first woman Secretary of State
I'm being
died. It's a shame.
Facetious. I know. Madeline Albright today, right?
Right. That's all the headlines. First woman Secretary of State.
You see what they do.
It's incredible, and then the entire thing is, I've been a feminist, anti-racist. I lived in Virginia when my school was segregated, and when they desegregated it, they announced all the black people had Down syndrome, and because I had Down syndrome, they all joined my special education class. Thankfully, I recovered from Down syndrome, and so I saw this racism up close and personal. I saw the colored only, whites only signs and everything when I was growing up, and then this whole woke thing has just it's probably the thing that most damaged efforts at ending racism and homophobia and sexism and all that, is just to do this horrible. I mean, it's the Democratic Party's wokeness is the largest attack against diversity that they're claiming they're supporting. I think that is also outrageous. The entire, well, I mean, a lot of us, and probably yourselves too, before Biden got into power, was like, oh, this is going to be a nightmare. I remember when Clinton came to announce he was going to run for president of the United States in Union Square in San Francisco, the richest part of San Francisco, on a cable car. And I snuck in with a big piece of cardboard and a magic marker. And I wrote 4 things about Bill Clinton. And one of them was that he killed Ricky Ray Rector, who was a kid with Down syndrome who was accused of killing a Arkansas state trooper. And when he was going off to, he had his last supper, he told the jailers that after he'd come back after the execution to have his dessert. So that's who Clinton killed for political reasons, so he could run for president of the United States. The other thing, of course, we know is Hassan Fuss crashing in Nicaragua. And I had friends that were outside of Clinton's mansion with signs demanding he stop the flights out of Arkansas to support the Contra War. Mm-hmm. Then I had a friend of mine killed in the Contra War, Benjamin Linder. He was partners with one of the co-founders of Food Not Violence, Mayor Brown at the time. And so these people have been, involved in this kind of shenanigans and violence and murder and mayhem for all their political careers.
What was 3 and 4?
And I can't remember what the other ones were.
Those are 2 great ones right there, by the way. That was,
I know. I wish
this guy's a political guy when he's putting those things up there. A lot of people don't understand about the planes that went off from Arkansas going to support this Contra situation and whatnot.
It might have been that he was first to send National Guard directly into fight in the Contra War. Might be another one. Of course, then there's Hillary and her, when I was a kid, the back of every Walmart truck had an American flag on it, said always made in America. She was the one that was able to, with her husband doing NAFTA, get everything shipped off to either Latin America or to Asia to be manufactured. So I mean, there's a criminal syndicate way back. And then so I also decided to look at the statistics on hunger because now the big news story in the mainstream media is how because of the war there's going to be shortages in food in the U.S. That's the main concern that anybody might have, right? But you look at the number of people not eating in Yemen or in Somalia and so on. It's outrageous. And then I wrote when I wrote the Anarchist Cookbook, I have a section in there on famines. And the famines, when I grew up, the famines were supposed to be because they couldn't grow the food and stuff. But I've been like, for instance, when you're in Ethiopia, you can see massive amounts of people starving, but the state-of-the-art greenhouses, and that's because all the food there is being, flown out of Addis to Saudi Arabia and to China and to Europe. That's the same Somalia. We're set for every ton of food aid that went into Somalia during the main famine or the Biafran famine or any of these famines, 3 or 4 times that amount of food is shipped to the West. Just the same idea as the potato famine in Ireland. I mean, or even the famines at the end of the fall of Rome were all economic. They were not because people couldn't grow food. That's a handy thing for imperialists to claim that, people are going hungry. And when food bombs first started, that was, people were also going, well, there's no hunger in the United States. Well, we were already providing groceries to housing projects for people that were desperate there. And that's hence where the name food bombs came from, because the housing project I was taking food to was across the street from Draper Lab, where they were designing the guidance system for intercontinental nuclear missiles. So, so this is, now the hunger worldwide, and then you look at, all the main areas of the world where there is mass starvation are also areas where the U.S. is waging war. So you just go to like Al Jazeera had a list of all the hotspots for hunger in 2022 on their website, and the U.S. is involved in a conflict in, I believe, all of them. And so we could have, just by not spending billions a year on killing people around the world in direct war, we could have also ended hunger, because those wars would have not devastated those countries and forced people into such extreme poverty and desperation. And food aid is not really the solution. Ending the wars and a living wage and housing, and these things are the solutions. And people ruling the world have known that all along. But it's a nice myth that, the rainfall was not enough and therefore people are going hungry in Ethiopia. But they got plenty of water in the Nile. They're just using it for, to water crops that make, the thing in Ethiopia was crazy is most of it was tulips going to Holland, while people are starving. I mean, and you see that with, like in Mexico, the paintings that were done during the famines of the Great Depression. And, that you see the calla lily paintings and so on, which was a political statement against that.
So, Keith, I have one last thing before we get you out of here. I wanted everybody to see this daily fake of how mainstream media has pretty much framed this conflict like Russians are attacking civilians. And what they have done is we have found, obviously, a lot of falsified media pictures from other incidents used, complete total propaganda manufactured and used. But there's another thing that they're claiming is that the Russians are purposely hitting civilians. While if you actually watch non-Western media, you see that it is the Ukrainian army that is actually using the civilians as human shields. They're using structures that are no longer used or that have been abandoned to say that civilians are there. The hospital is an example, the theater, another one, schools, and they're also stopping people from leaving. So this is just a quick video on how the mainstream media has framed this and how you can easily debunk it by actually watching what they're doing.
Spread by the Western media.
In the capital city of Kyiv, a shopping mall was bombed, killing at least 8 people. Sarah Williamson now joins us live with more on the attack. Sarah?
It's completely cordoned off, and there are some parts of this building that we are actually not allowed to film, hence why we're up here on this platform. This is the only part of the building that we can film from this angle.
And there's a good reason you're not allowed any closer. Since the shopping mall has been recently used, let's say for different purposes.
Украинские националисты продолжают использовать жилые кварталы населенных пунктов и социальные объекты в качестве живого щита для размещения своих артиллерийских систем и ведения массированного огня по российским военнослужащим. Так, на окраине Киева, в районе Винограды, украинские националистические подразделения в течение нескольких дней прикрывались жилыми домами и вели обстрелы из реактивных систем залпового огня по российским военнослужащим. При этом площади, расположенные рядом торгового центра, использовались в качестве крупной базы для хранения реактивных боеприпасов и перезарядки систем залпового огня. Российской разведкой по нескольким каналам были подтверждены координаты позиций украинских реактивных систем залпового огня, а также вскрыто расположение склада с реактивными боеприпасами. На видеокадрах объективного контроля хорошо видно, как в торговый центр на окраине Киева въезжает украинская установка залпового огня для укрытия после очередного залпа и перезарядки ракет. Высокоточным оружием большой дальности ночью 21 марта была уничтожена батарея украинских реактивных систем залпового огня и база хранения их боеприпасов в неработающем торговом центре. Хотим еще раз обратить внимание западных средств массовой информации. Нами представлены абсолютные доказательства преступного использования киевским националистическим режимом гражданских объектов в жилых кварталах Киева и в других городах Украины в качестве огневых позиций, артиллерии и реактивных систем. Должен подчеркнуть, что специальную военную операцию проводит профессиональная армия, которая действительно использует и крылатые ракеты. Их применение в высшей степени эффективно. Ими наносятся высокоточные удары по военной инфраструктуре и ни в коем случае не по гражданским объектам.
No wonder the Ukrainians are being asked not to post pictures like this one. You know, the one exposing their military vehicles hidden behind civilian infrastructure.
Right. So a lot of this is manufactured to foment hatred for Russians. We've seen the literature attacked. We've seen stupid things like dressings and mustards and anything that's culturally Russian, right? This xenophobia, this Russophobia that has been happening. And as you said, you know, you practiced drills back in the day. That has been cultivated for a long time in the American psyche through movies, through propaganda via the CIA, every, you know, James Bond movie to even the Bourne Identity type of movies. So this is nothing new, but it is essential that media exists to counteract that, and that, you know, we exist to counteract this fomenting of manufacturing consent for war.
Yeah, the well, you can also see there's a direct connection with a lot of the media to arms manufacturers, not only having either in the past been owned by them, but certainly being, you know, that they're sponsors and advertisers. And that's I think that's one of the frightening things about the new this whole censorship that really grew up with. I mean, the big famous one, of course, is Trump being taken off of Twitter, and you know that, yeah, and what hypocrisy, since the same people were running his rallies nonstop without interruption, as he got billions of dollars in free advertising running up for the election, and then cut him off. But that was not so much, you know, he was entertaining. His tweets were odd. It was comical sort of thing to be watching. But and in fact, the alleged tweets that were supposedly so dangerous were completely benign. But it was more like, okay, if we can take out this rich billionaire that was a president, then we can take everybody out. And that was what that was about. Now we're into this like wholesale thing. I mean, it's incredible. And then this kind of lie that the particularly Democrats, but many people are promoting, which is that, well, it's a private corporation and therefore it's not censorship. But the reality, these tech giants are also completely immersed in the military. You know, their military contracts are sometimes where they make most of their money compared to you know, like selling data to other corporations. So that's why it's so important to actually communicate with people that on the ground. So like one of the things that really exposed a lot of the psycho-ness of the media. So, you know, you turn on NPR, or Democracy Now, that's like gone really south, or you know, and it was like nonstop vaccine. You got to get vaccine. Got a vaccine. It's the only thing that can get vaccine. COVID. So I mean, maybe a little bit of stories about getting vaccinated, maybe it's okay, but look at the billions of dollars. It's like, so then when this war starts up, it's all Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine on everything. And including even before there was a possibility of a nuclear war, I started seeing like on Facebook, nuclear explosion memes by Homeland Security, by FEMA, that you could survive a nuclear war. And you go to ready.gov nuclear, you can see the very first sentence paragraph is about how you can survive a nuclear war. They're like building up this idea that you could survive a nuclear war. That's crazy that a government, so why would a government before a conflict where then there were like, oh, the Russians bombed the largest nuclear site in Europe, so, oh my God, or then there's no biological weapons labs in Ukraine, and then there are, it's very, very dangerous. And you do hear, we've had people, when we had a Food Not Bombs global meeting and we tried to like organize like a global protest against the war, but some of us thought that we should also call for an end to NATO, because at the time of the end, when the Soviet Union ended, there was a lot of us calling for an end to NATO. NATO was there to stop, allegedly to stop the Soviet Union from advancing further through Germany than even though they're the ones that won the damn World War II. So I don't know. They have some saying something, but that was just I couldn't even get the Food Not Bombs kids to everybody to come to consensus that we should say no NATO and no invasion, no war, no killing people. In general, but that got blocked because no, we have to say yes, NATO. Well, it turned out that one chapter, interestingly enough, was also the hyper intense. They never left their house. They were freaking out about COVID, even worse than, and so there's I think maybe the saddest thing besides all the threat to life on Earth, which is definitely a sad thing, is the fact that being open-minded and thinking for yourself and questioning, the same people that told us that there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, the people that told us the Gulf of Tonkin Bay story that killed millions, that was a total lie, in Vietnam, which resulted in murder not only of millions of people in Vietnam, but Cambodia and Laos and thousands of Americans. How many of us have parents and grandparents and that are traumatized completely by the Vietnam War or the Iraq War based on lies. So it's we have like a massive mental health crisis in our country because of these wars for profit. The only people that really made money are the military contractors. And then one final thing, as I know you probably got some other amazing guests and more things to report on, but my grandfather was OSS in World War II, and he was the director of Operation Meeting House, which is, according to Daniel Ellsberg in his book, the largest, and according even to Wikipedia, which is not necessarily to be trusted, it said a few 100,000 people were killed in Operation Meeting House in the firebombing of Tokyo. And my grandfather believed it was more in the area of a couple of million people. And he had those photos of the firebombing of Tokyo that he had taken from the bomb bay of a B-29, so they could figure out how much fuel and more petrol bombs to carry to bomb the city of Tokyo again. And so I grew up watching him during the Vietnam War in like 1966, 67, 68, arguing with his friends McNamara and Curtis LeMay and Westmoreland. I don't think he was a friend of Westmoreland, but he was an acquaintance of Westmoreland, trying to convince them they should drop the atomic bomb on Hanoi, because we had to send a message to the communists that that Hiroshima and Nagasaki were not one-offs, that we were willing to do it again. And so he was a nice old grandfather, we would play, he wouldn't let me beat him at checkers or anything like that. But he told me, I would grow up and I would have to decide who lived and who died, and then he called it white man's burden. And he also was involved in the opium trade to the black community of the United States because he was very concerned black people would think that they had the same rights as white people since they've been dying in the same wars as white people. And they're very clear. So these people, I don't think Americans get how the thinking and how evil these people can be. He was in a secret society like the Skull and Crossbones. He graduated, he had a degree from Harvard Law. He went to Dartmouth, and before that, Phillips Exeter. And his secret society was so secret that there's not even a name. So these people, he was clear, there was no God, there was no, only Satan. And his war was to defend capitalism. And you could not allow the public to have a say in the direction of society because they would be a threat to the profitability of capitalism. And when I lived in his basement in the 7th grade, 8th grade, I lived next to these 2 filing cabinets, which he sold to Ken Olson. And those 2 filing cabinets became digital electronics. And so these people are clear about their intention. They don't care how many people they kill. It's all about their ability to control their own destiny of profit and power. And they have no humanity whatsoever.
Yeah. Well, Keith, I know we said we're going to get you out of here, but I just need as quick as you can response, because, there's so many things that, and I want to ask this question lightly, because you are the author of the Anarchist Cookbook, which is about making vegan food for the homeless and feeding people instead of bombing them. And the way you describe anarchy is not like the traditional mindset of what we think anarchism is, anarchism is in America, that it's just against the government, rage against the machine. It's more of a beautiful thing by getting these predator class people off our shoulders. And when you said that thing about the tents, right, about giving out the tents, the fam, we've done that for somebody before, for a homeless person, and it really touched a nerve, because how thankful that person was for that tent, but to live in a tent on the street. My question to you is this, and as careful as possible, without us getting yanked and yourself in even more trouble, how do we change this system that we're in? How do we get this predator class off our shoulders, that we're not buying bombs to bomb the whole country and the resource extraction from stealing indigenous people's resources? How do we make this change in your mind?
Well, I think the thing is that I think one of the priorities, so we've been, we're going to celebrate our 42nd anniversary in May.
Put a full screen of Keith,
and
please.
So from my point of view, we have to essentially create our own society outside this society. That would be what it, and we can see with the pandemic, that was in fact there was like a start of that, because the government did not feed or house people or handle the crisis. They supported the closing of small businesses and schools and so on. So around the world, one of the beautiful things about these global Food Not Bomb Zoom meetings is to see how, when the societies and the governments themselves collapsed around the world, as far as intentionally or otherwise failing to meet the needs of the people that did meet the needs were these organizations like Food Not Bombs and other mutual aid groups. And so we did we fed people every day. We were the social service agency. I was trying to get a couple of families into a hotel or housing, and I would call, like, they had a new homeless czar here in Santa Cruz for $150,000 a year, or the Robert Ratner from Housing for Health. And I started calling them up and saying, "Hi, this is Keith from the Housing Authority," because we were the ones housing people, sadly, in pup tents. They were not housing people. And so I think part of it is and we did it all with volunteer work. And we all did it together. And I think that was kind of one of the big threats, and probably still will be the big threat, is the fact that we have a community of people that are cooperating. So on the streets, the people that live outside are the people that actually physically built the United States. And so they have those skills. They ran the hospitals, the kitchens. Half of our volunteers are unhoused people. We have talent in the streets, and then the other thing is so I think that ultimately there's going to be sort of like in the book 1984 by Orwell. They will end up being like the people that are wedded to the political and economic system that are essentially going to be kind of digital slaves. And then there's going to be the rest of us that are going to live outside of that system. And then where we're going to have to interact between us and this brutal system is getting out of the way of their militaristic assaults on us. And because I don't think that there's a possibility of us, militarily defeating, the largest militaries in the world. But I think we can be, those people in those militaries are the people whose families are homeless and living on the streets and who are going to be potentially joining those ranks. So over time, building, I think one of the key points, and I have in all of the last 3 books I have, is to be on time. It's that, I know that seems really pathetic, but the fact is that builds this trust and this honesty and connection to the community, that you respect them, and then they respect you because you don't take them for granted. You're not like, oh, they're a bunch of bums, so if I'm like 30 minutes late with the meal, that doesn't make any difference. No, we are on time every day, 730, maybe like I say, 740 days in a row, because it's that realistic connection and not looking down on people and realizing that we do have the capability. If we're maybe failing in this particular economic and political system, but that's actually fine, because this economic and political system just needs to disappear. So if a majority of us are living outside this economic and political system, and we are working together and surviving and building our own culture, in our own media and our own music and our own everything, then that is ultimately what an anarchist revolution would be, is that we would just switch out from like in my first book, Food Not Bombs, How to Feed the Hungry and Build Community, there's the death culture, which is the one waging these wars and depriving people of their basic dignity and resources. And then there's art culture. And because of the failure of the state and the failure of corporate power to actually consider humanity as something other than a commodity, we are now growing. We're the fastest growing group of people, right? The homeless. We're in a growth industry, if you want to call it an industry, because before long, there's 40 million Americans facing eviction that was discussed in the eviction project at Princeton will be the 40 million people that are living, in this kind of a new way of having to make ends meet. And another thing that I think is really important and is very difficult to overcome, and I think this is one of our biggest direct problem for us, is I try to remind people that the drug crisis, particularly the heroin and meth crisis, and the Prozac crisis, or whatever the other mental health drugs that are used, it's chemical warfare by the government. So we get the big dramatic false flag chemical warfare in Syria, or the one that the Nazis will pull off in Ukraine in the coming days, or the cyber, but this is the real chemical warfare. My casualties that I personally lost in the last 2 years in Santa Cruz were either directly from vaccine injections, or they were from, more likely, in most cases, it turned out to be fentanyl, and it was just fentanyl-laced heroin, fentanyl-laced meth, and really shockingly was free distribution of fentanyl-laced marijuana that was left in little baggies all around town, which killed off several of my friends. So that's the casualties of this war and the chemical war against the people of the world, but particularly the United States, which most impacts me directly, it is the chemical warfare that I think we should be paying attention to, and that is the chemical warfare of the government. It's intentional, not a mistake. That's what my grandfather was telling me in 1966, 67, 68. And there's no reason to believe he was making up a story to his young grandson, who he assumed would take on the role of deciding who lived and who died.
Yeah.
Keith McHenry, we're gonna show your tweet here to send you off. So he has this pinned tweet on his profile. So let's put it up. It says, ban all weapons of mass destruction and biological, chemical, nuclear, food not bombs. Go find him on Twitter at Keith_McHenry, and also check out foodnotbombs.net, which is where everything happens.
Thank you so much, you guys, for hanging in there through this very rough several years of frightening fascism.
Yeah, and it's going to get worse before it gets better, I think. So lucky to have people like you out there on the ground.
You're beautiful, Keith. We love you. And what'd you make today, by the way? What was the food today? Just
I haven't gone down yet. I had to. I was doing this show. I'm the what we call the closing driver, and I'm showing a new volunteer who's in this writing workshop with me, Bo, how to close. And and at some point, theoretically, this book I'm writing, which is getting very close to finishing, will be available, and it talks about some of these things.
I mean, I read your cookbook, so it was like, wow, like I want to. Like I said, I still want to come and cook for you, so we got to go do this one day.
Yeah, you've got to. And then I'll be down. And are you all in LA or something? I'm going down to a protest in LA in early, I think on the April.
When?
8th or something.
In April 10th or?
Yeah, whatever that Sunday is, where there's a protest against mandates. And
yeah, I'll be one of the MCs for that.
Yeah, so I'll hopefully personally meet you at that. You know.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
We
got a lot of talk about foreign policy
to go to an actual real protest against fascism. So.
Keith McHenry, ladies and gentlemen, guys like me and him are valuable in the zombie apocalypse because we can cook. We love you.
That's
Keith.
right. Yeah, the zombie apocalypse needs chefs.
Thank you. We love you, Keith.
Bye-bye,
really, we do, brother.
Bye-bye. Take care.
See you later.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
He's amazing. He's amazing.
He is. He's a wealth of knowledge, and I hope everybody got to see some of that too. And he's been on the right side of history every single time, as you can see. I was getting a little nervous there with the mentioning of the stuff, but yeah, I mean, yeah, opioid crisis, fam. That's why I like what you and Shanda do, because that really draws an eye to it.
Yeah. By the way, fam, should we just do your section today, and we can kick my section to Friday, so we just have one section? I know we've been going for like it's 2:13 right now. So we can do that because you got a pretty loaded section yourself coming up.
Yeah. So let's see how long it takes to do this section. And then we can come back with the COVID either.
Slide 14.
Next time. Because I won't be here Friday. So.
Well, I have Kim Iverson on the show Friday. So do you like the way I pause that over there?
Did you just decide to announce that? Okay, guys, Kim will be on the show. She's replacing me on Friday, not for good. But just for Friday.
Whoa, let's see how she performs first, fam. Let's not jump the gun. You replaced me twice already right now. Alex Rubenstein got my job the last I heard. So come on, let's go.
Listen, Kim's gonna replace you instead. How about that? Two ladies, hello. All right.
A lot of fire on that set. Wow.
Let's start. You leftist libertarians will have fun though. The U.S. dollar is in danger, fam. This goes right along with what Keith was talking about, kind of touching on the food not bombs. So there's the U.S. dollar is in danger, and of course this has been a long time coming. But the UN is warning about a food insecurity, a really high food insecurity. So I summed up the news this morning with a few things that we're going to talk about. So the UN is warning of a highest risk of food insecurity since World War II, and France's Macron also said the same thing, and he said it was because of the military involvement with Ukraine. And simultaneously, of course, Putin stated that the European payments for gas supplies must be switched ASAP to Russian rubles. They said, saying that the West has destroyed confidence in their currency. So we're going to go into that a little bit more deeply here. This article by RT talks about the spiking fertilizer prices, sparking fear of global hunger. World on the brink of worst food insecurity since World War II, and the UN said this. The latest sanctions imposed on Russia and Belarus have sent global prices for fertilizer, as we said weeks ago, fam, soaring to an all-time high. The two countries are major exporters of potash, critical for the global agricultural industry, which is already reeling from the pandemic-related disruptions. Again, this is just added on top of what we were already talking about. So they talk about how fertilizers prices surged nearly 10% last week versus the previous week. And this is according to Green Market's North American Fertilizer Price Index, the highest price point ever recorded. The index shows current prices are at 40% higher than a month ago, before Russia's military operation in Ukraine began. According to CRU, a UK-based commodity consultancy, prices for raw materials that make up the crop nutrient commodity markets, such as ammonia, nitrogen, potash, urea, phosphates, sulfates, and nitrates, saw a 30% surge since the beginning of the year, topping the levels reached during the 2008 financial crisis. Russia and Belarus are major exporters of several critical fertilizer compounds, including urea and potash. And again, this is the NOLA urea is trading at a 34-year high of $880 per U.S. ton, compared to the $182 recorded in 2020. Prices are up 60% since the West imposed these sanctions. So spiking prices for fertilizer have also been exacerbated by higher costs of natural gas and a vital feedstock in producing nitrogen-based fertilizer. Energy prices have been soaring amid European Union's plans to cut out reliance on Russian oil and gas supplies and bans imposed by the U.S. and a couple of other countries. Also, the situation is aggravated by China's ban on fertilizer exports, primarily nitrogen and phosphates. And that measure expires in June and was implemented to limit the rise in domestic food prices. So all of that is happening. And of course, there's also Canada's having issues with the Pacific Railways, which is supposed to worsen shortages, putting additional pressure on the global logistic chains. Canada's Nutrien, the world's biggest fertilizer producer, said it could weather a freight shutdown lasting a few days, but a longer shutdown would force it to consider slowing potash production. And of course, that the UN is warning that acute food insecurity was plaguing dozens of countries spanning Latin America, Central Africa, the Middle East, and Central Asia due to conflict and erratic environmental conditions. And they said that Ukraine has only compounded a catastrophe on top of a catastrophe. And so this is just going to be insane right now, fam.
Yeah. Well, that's not even just a labor. That's not a labor dispute. That's a full-on strike by the Teamsters in Canada that are shutting it down. So that to add insult to injury, what's already going on with the issues we have, and this is something we talked about for a long time. All these disputes, all these sanctions, all this money, all these blockading of one import or export of another, America's going to lose at the end of the day, right? Who's going to have to pay for it? The poor, the middle class, if there's anything left, whether it be financially or more people ending out in the streets. But what do you think this is going to do, ladies and gentlemen, to the price of our agriculture in the United States if we have these blockades with Russia and Belarus, who, quite frankly, fam, they're holding all the cards because they're holding on to the majority of the fertilizer that we need. 40% of the fertilizer we get in the United States comes from these two countries. Okay, yeah. For factory farmings and big farming and whatnot. Without it, we're screwed. So when you see Biden out there and Jen Psaki saying all this stuff and all these stupid people, we got to go anti-Putin and stuff, they don't give a damn because it's not going to affect them. It's going to affect us. It's going to affect the people on the streets. And people need to wake up to this right away while you have your little Ukrainian flag in your bio.
Yeah, and the fact that, we're seeing a price increase from $100 and something to $800 and something. That is insane. And some of these products, that is insane. That is ridiculous. That should warn you. And of course, to add insult to injury, because of a lot of people have been protesting Macron over his, neoliberalism for a while now. his solution, of course, is to introduce food vouchers. And this is from Hi India. The French president has warned of a global food crisis resulting from military actions in Ukraine. I mean, they know that their actions are causing this, right? And Emmanuel Macron reiterated his promise to issue struggling families with food vouchers amid sharp rises in fuel and raw materials costs caused by, as he claimed, the ongoing Russian military offensive in Ukraine. In an interview with France Blau radio on Tuesday, Macron said the world is facing a global food crisis, emphasizing that France has advised fellow European countries to come up with a, quote, concerted response to this issue. And of course, he is facing an election on April 10th and said his government has already taken a number of measures, including energy caps and fuel discounts to support the country's residents. That's not going to be nearly enough, by the way. And the grain deficit has been looming. We talked about how Ukraine and Russia are this whole issue is exacerbating everything. They say that Ukraine and Russia are true barns for the international food supply. I want to introduce food vouchers to help the most modest households and the middle classes to face these additional costs. He added that he would also want his compatriots to buy locally and to buy French products. Macron has mulled the idea of food vouchers since December 2020, now making it one of his campaign promises. Interesting, he didn't talk about that during the quote unquote pandemic. However, the details of the food support program are yet to be revealed. It is not yet known what amount these vouchers would be for, which products they would cover, how exactly they'd be distributed, and who would be eligible for them. So this is their solution. It's not really going to be enough. I mean, if what happens with the UN is saying is going to happen here. And of course, like we said, they're the world's largest suppliers of these crops. And this is according to the Conference on Trade and Development from the United Nations. They represent 53% of global trade in sunflower oil and seeds and 27% in wheat. The European Central Bank earlier said that the food inflation is expected to remain high throughout 2022 due to high commodity prices and extraordinary increases in gas and electricity prices. So they also warned that all countries would be inevitably impacted by this crisis, and it will impact the most vulnerable and developing countries, putting pressure on the poorest households. I mean, this is stuff we already knew was going to happen, fam. We've been talking about this. When it comes to these sanctions, not only are they going to hurt, obviously, some of the Russian people and Ukrainian people especially, but they're going to hurt the people in European nations, the working class people in America. And I don't think these people in the West understand what that means yet. Well, I don't think they're taking it seriously.
Keith McHenry said, plain and simple, fam, like the gas prices alone, right? You're talking about Europe, they're going to get hit hard, especially with the Nord Stream 2 getting, nixed. And now all that gas that Russia has, all that oil is going to China and the Belt and Road Initiative at a good price. They'll pay for it, no problem. But we sit here and, I wonder what Oz feels too as well, is that we're sitting here in this situation. We see this stuff happening over and over again. And it's clearly at fault of the ruling class, whatnot, the decisions that they make. At what point do we continue to take this? Are we going to just continue to take this way? I mean, that's why I had to ask that question to Keith. His suggestion is starting, parallel kind of societies we talk about with Steve and stuff, but how long, fam? Because, I got to be honest with you, it does blow my mind that it seems like the acceleration and the bad choices, they're constantly made over and over and over again. And whoever's running things, it seems like they don't give a damn about what terrible leadership they give us, because we're going to take it no matter what.
Right. So the progressives right now are focused on the judge appointee right now. That's what they're talking about. It is absolute insanity. And they're like, it's representative. It's a representative woman of color, blah, blah, blah. That's what because they're still comfortable enough. And I think, a lot of these people who talk about being, Marxist or being anarchists are none of those things. They're just, they're cosplay, and they have still the ability to ignore really what's happening and pretend that, some virtue signal of electing somebody representative is a big deal right now as all of this is happening. And that's just a giant distraction that they're using because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who's a judge. It doesn't matter, who's president at this point. It doesn't matter who your representatives are. They're not in control. The national security state apparatus is in control, and they're mad at Biden now, a lot of them, because he hasn't been as aggressive as they would like him to be. And I think we're seeing that also be obvious when it comes to the Hunter Biden situation. Now that they've admitted, the New York Times admitted that the laptop thing was real, of course, not really taking accountability whatsoever for the fact that so many people were censored and taken down over even just mentioning it. They just took what Hardlands Media gave them a strike, and then they appealed it, and they, fortunately for them, got the strike off. But it's still that sort of thing where they're getting away with this, and these people, a lot of these people were like, oh, they thought it was conspiracy theory by the right, by Trump, and all of that. Of course, they were wrong on that. They've been wrong on every single thing. Yet, people still continue to watch these people. And it's crazy to me that they do, but I think it's a matter of cognitive dissonance. They don't want to see that what's really happening, because what's really happening, the reality that we're living in, is extremely heavy. It's extremely negative. And I think a lot of people just don't want to deal with that reality.
It's funny because I was thinking today, I was like laughing, chuckling, and me and Steve were talking. I'm like, if the show was probably 3-4 years ago, probably Fee might have had something in the doc to talk about the nomination of the first woman of color, right? Black woman, I believe, to be elected to the Supreme Court. But I'm like, no, not today, because she understands, like, what difference does it make? They're not in charge, right? This is when you have a corrupt system. Who cares who's a judge and whatnot? But I believe, too, fam, correct me if I'm wrong, that this particular nomination has every single police union endorsement out there.
Yeah.
From what I heard as well. Well, what are the progressives on that?
They ignore whatever destroys their narrative. Yeah, exactly. It's not good. It's an approved status quo nomination. It's
Absolutely.
Not everything else is theater. The Republicans are like, no.
She's friendly to pedophiles.
The Republicans are like, like using their whole theater to show this sort of, oh my gosh, we're Republicans or Democrats, blah, blah, blah. But it's all theater. Like, really, what's really happening is this. Like, what's really happening is we're about to have a massive food shortage. The dollar is sinking. The West is going to feel, for once, a portion of what other people have been going through. Because my main man, as I am accused, Vladimir Putin, said in a statement to TASS, it's Russian media, he declared that the U.S. and EU have declared in principles a real breach of their obligations to Russia. And I'm going to read exactly what he says. But first, let's talk about the gas prices in Europe, because the gas prices in Europe have exceeded $1,350 after Putin ordered to accept payment for gas in rubles. Okay, earlier this Wednesday, today, the Russian president said that Russia would refuse to accept payments for natural gas supplies in, quote, compromised currencies. And as of today, the price of gas in Europe exceeded $13.50 per 1,000 cubic meters after the order of Russian President Vladimir Putin to supply gas to unfriendly countries only for rubles, according to the London ICE Exchange. The April future price at the futures price at the TTF hub in the Netherlands rose to 1,353 per 1,000 cubic meters, or 118.75 euros per MWH based on the current euro/dollar exchange rate. And so this is, since the beginning of trading, the prices of gas have increased by almost 20.3%. And of course, Vladimir Putin said Russia would refuse to accept these compromised currency payments, including dollars and euros, and would move the payments to rubles. He stressed that future change in gas contracts with unfriendly countries will only affect the currency of the payment. It will be changed to the Russian ruble. So they're still going to do it, but it's just going to be Russian rubles instead. Yeah. He also instructed the government to issue a corresponding directive to Gazprom to amend existing contracts. The finance ministry and the central bank within a week should determine the procedure for the purchase of rubles on the domestic market by importers of Russian gas. And there was a summary from the talk he had with the TASS. And he said, with its decision to freeze Russian international assets, the West has actually declared default on Moscow and destroyed the reliability of its currencies. Russian President Vladimir Putin said Wednesday at a meeting with his country's government this week. Wednesday, he said, quote, over the last few weeks, as you know, various Western countries have made illegitimate decisions on the so-called freezing of Russian assets. And the collective West has actually drawn a line under the reliability of their currencies, destroying confidence in those currencies. So he added that both the United States and the European Union have declared in principle a real breach of their obligations to Russia. And now everyone knows it. They suspected it. And now everyone knows that obligations in dollars and euros may not be fulfilled, is what he said. So there is a video of him talking a little bit about this. We can go ahead and play it.
We'll transition to charging supplies for natural gas and other raw materials in Russian rubles when dealing with unfriendly countries. Russia, of course, will continue supplying natural gas and will respect all the obligations and the pricing under the contracts that we have signed. Unlike some of our colleagues, we treasure our reputation as a reliable supplier and a reliable partner. This only concerns the currency in which we will transact these payments. We will transition to rubles.
By the way, fam, rubles is one of the only currencies that's still backed in gold. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's an important point to make. But I was going to say, he could technically just say, no, we're not going to follow these contracts because you guys have breached your contracts. But they're following through with the contracts in spite of the actions by the West, right? And also the only thing they're changing is the rubles. And that's a very smart move, in my opinion. That's a very Russian chess player type of move, because you're not, outright saying, oh, we're just not going to give you what you want. We're going to give it to you, but we're going to change the currency. And in that way, you're sort of impacting them negatively in a different way. You're showing them too that you're not joking, you're stepping your foot down. And that's something that I think, the West is highly irritated about. It also shows the shift that we've been talking about here, like having the audacity by so many on the West, Anthony Blinken and Jen Psaki, the State Department, the Victoria Nulands, all of these people are probably like, oh my God, how dare he? Like, how dare he do this to us? But the petrodollar's sinking, it's sunk already. And Vladimir Putin is simply going along with that. And of course, we talked about, potentially Saudi Arabia putting the yuan over the dollar. We've talked about the exchange that happened between India and Russia for gas and rupees for rubles and that sort of thing. And this is a signal of more of what's to come, fam.
Yeah. It totally is. And that's why I posed the question to Keith, what do we do? I posed the question to you and Oz, how long are we going to take this to? Because this seems like the controlled demolition of the United States empire. And at the end of the day, that means all the citizens within that empire, those are the ones who are going to be starving and suffering, especially all these people, who are reliant on the American dollar. They don't have anything diversified. And that's why you saw a lot of big companies like BlackRock, Blackstone, buy up all these properties. All the people who had money were buying property, property. Everybody's like, oh my God, during COVID, the housing market's going to crash. No, it didn't. It expanded because a lot of these bigger entities started mopping up everything out there right now. And that's what's going to happen. We are cutting our nose to spite our face. If we think we can cut off Russia and China and all these, we're sanctioning China, fam, because they're not huffing and puffing against Russia at our behest. Modi told us to go scratch. Like, no, we're not going to do this anymore. So we are really, really hurting ourselves. And I shouldn't say we, the ruling class is hurting us. And if we don't take the car away from them, if we don't take the keys away from them, fam, and that's what we need to do. We need to take the keys away from them. Sorry, you can't drive this car anymore. Can't do it. We're going to have to drive it ourselves. If we don't do that anytime soon, we are doomed. We are doomed.
Yeah, and there are neocons right now that want to actually go into a full-out war.
Of course they do.
And they don't care what that means. Like they don't, like they're psychopaths. They don't understand that means like the destruction of
and the
so
mentality, fam, of the military huffing and puffing and stuff. We were in the streets the other day, right, in Vegas. And we asked somebody who said he's a fighter pilot, and that's actually what he does for a living. He was out having a good time in Vegas. He was on leave. And we said, well, we hope you don't have to go over there to that neck of the woods and do anything. He goes, we would wipe the ground with him. And I just looked at him and I said, and I don't give a damn if he was military or not. I said, you think we can go over to Putin's backyards and mess with them with their MiGs when they can fire missiles from their own airspace while they're to go, bomb targets in the Ukraine? I'm like, this is Russia's backyard. You got some sick mentality over here to think that you can just go over there and wipe the floor with another superpower that has just as many bombs as us. The mentality just blows my mind here. People need to get out of their G.I. Joe friggin' mentality. This is real shit you're dealing here, real lives, and enough.
They're not bluffing. Russia's not bluffing
at all,
and that's a lot of these idiots think they are, and they're going to be extremely disappointed. We're all going to be screwed if they continue this way. And another marker in the shift is, of course, Venezuela. Venezuela coming into play a lot these days. So according to the Russia's ambassador to Venezuela, Sergei Melik Bagdasarov, Venezuela and Russia will continue building their military cooperation, and the two nations are working on connecting Venezuela to the MIR payment system, which is the Russian system for electronic bank transfers. And that is also verified, if you didn't believe me, directly from the Russian side. The AP had to verify this, that Venezuela's leader pledges military cooperation with Russia. In Caracas, Venezuela, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro pledged a powerful military cooperation with Russia following high-level discussions between officials on Wednesday, a day after diplomats from the U.S. and several other nations gathered to discuss steps towards a negotiated solution to the South American country's protracted crisis. So that is happening as well simultaneously. And he said, we have reviewed the powerful military cooperation, and we have ratified the path of a powerful military cooperation between Russia and Venezuela for the defense of peace, of sovereignty, and the defense of territorial integrity, Maduro said during a news conference. We are going to increase all the preparation, training, cooperation plans with a military power to the world, such as Russia. This came about a month after Maduro and Russian President Vladimir Putin spoke by phone about cooperation between their countries amid talks of possible Russian troop deployment to Venezuela. So if the United States thought that by going to Venezuela and trying to play nice with them was going to make Venezuela forget the attempted and failed coup, the push of Juan Guaido, the attainment of their refineries in gold, and of course the jailing of Alex Saab and everything they've done since, they were wrong. And we said as much. Venezuela was always going to stand with Russia in those terms. They were just not going to be, they were going to do business with whoever because like they need the money. And this is now a position that they have where they have the upper hand. So I think I think this just shows like everybody's kind of like, it's kind of like the US is kind of like the person nobody wants to date right now. Like, you're crazy. I don't want to deal with your shit right now. Like,
she may look pretty, but she's crazy on the inside. And Sam, they validified, right? They validified. Okay, take it easy. They validified Maduro by meeting with him not too long ago. And the title of that AP article says Venezuela's leader. It doesn't say Venezuela's de facto leader or Venezuela's authoritarian. They are now solidifying the fact that, Nicolas Maduro is the leader of that country. And of course, they're going to play ball with Russia. We knew this. Anybody who's paying attention to the situation knew that Venezuela is going to go, to hell with Russia. Let's work with the United States. No, they got the United States to verify, solidify that Nicolas Maduro is their leader. And fam, by the way, when you do the Nicolas Maduro, you do it in the accent. I think from now on, if you read anything from Putin, you should do it in a Putin accent. That's just my personal opinion.
First of all, there's no validified. That's not a word. You do like the crazies. So I just had to point that out. I think you meant validated, but
no, validify is a Brooklyn term we use over there.
Oh my God. Now everything that you make up is a Brooklyn term. Jesus Christ.
You know, I can't understand why you can't respect my culture. It's just terrible.
I know you're a very marginalized man.
You hear Oz is laughing in the background. Let's Super Ray contributions. Thank you so much. Arthur said, oh, by the way, Eric Bull, thank you for the Super Ray contribution. It is always appreciated on the desk, I should say, or on the couch. Arthur Carter, thank you so much. We do appreciate your Super Ray contribution. Is always appreciated on the couch. And fam, old school AREM is here. Thank you, Pasta and Fiorella and Oz in the overalls. The combo couch rocks. See, Oz, they're talking about those overalls, man.
Yeah, Oz is famous now. So
the
yeah,
overalls.
thank you guys for tuning in and for watching. Yeah, I mean, it was a war program today, but that's what's happening. And I urge everybody to really diversify any money they have. Don't leave it, you know, if you have a 401k and all that, don't leave it there. Either if you can have property, have it. If you can't, buy gold or copper or other things, you know, even crypto. I mean, at this point,
You gotta diversify.
I don't see the dollar being strong for a while, and this is not going to be pretty. And also, of course, have some seeds to grow food in case anything happens like that.
Spices, fam.
Yeah,
We're bringing back the spice trade. Get a lot of turmeric and keep it in your cabinet. You're gonna need turmeric.
Fam, I love turmeric.
Who
Yeah.
doesn't love turmeric? By the way, can I read off the fact, fam? We had a new subscriber this morning. Also, too, as well, we had a TD left us a generous tip on the morning show Rockfin premium. He left an amazing tip this morning, so I just want to say thank you for that. And let me see really quick so I could read off. We have a new subscriber, and I don't have it here. I'd have to find it later, but we do have a new. Oh, here it is, fam. New subscriber, A Butterfly, subscribed to the Rockfin and retaining subscription. Dartruff, Lawrence Johnson, Jacid Smith, Angel Santos, and Ruthieism, as well as Patricia, Alex Knight, our boy Alex Knight, we love you, all retain their subscriptions. Thank you so much, guys. You guys were awesome. I'm glad you guys did it. It was amazing. Amazing. Totally amazing.
Wow. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
We appreciate it. It's always appreciated.
Fam, do it for me. Go ahead.
No, I can't.
You don't do tricks. All right. And thank you all there to all our Patreons out there. You people are rock. All the people who subscribe on a Rockfin. It is amazing. Guys, if you can subscribe on a Rockfin, it's only $9.99 a month. You get our premium content and everybody else's premium content across the board. So it's a one price fits all. So that's great. And thank you to everybody who left a few PayPals, Benny Massimo, all those cool people, and all the people who just like, share, subscribe, and share our stuff. That alone, we are so humbled and loving that you do that for us as well.
Yes, you guys have what did you say? Validity.
You don't even know the word. You don't even know the English language. Okay.
What?
Validity.
That's crazy.
You validified.
Yeah, validified. What the hell?
That's a
I don't know
term.
the pasta-ism. That's not English.
All right, that's it. For Pasta Jardula.
Well, I'm going to learn Russian. I'm going to speak another language while you.
Okay, so once again, great show. So for Pasta Jardula.
So I'm guessing you'll do the last section with Kim Ivermectin.
Don't say that.
It's
Don't
a
even
joke.
say it.
I'm joking. It's her nickname by the shit
Yes,
left.
we will. Kim Iverson and I will do it on Friday, as she has a tryout to replace you the way you replaced me.
She's
with the
trying
last
out
two
to
people.
replace you.
Oh God, I'm gonna take my own poison pill for Pasta Jardula.
Fiorella.
Oz on those ones and twos. Thanks for hanging in for a long show today, guys.
Combo out.
We love you.